The sun filtered softly through the windows of the Harris County Family Court, casting long shadows on the polished wood floors. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, and Courtroom 4B was just beginning its list of family custody hearings. Nothing about the docket suggested this would be anything more than a standard legal procedure. Yet, fate had something very different in store. Claire Bennett sat on the left side of the courtroom with her attorney, nervously clutching her purse in her lap. Next to her, in a tiny pink dress, sat her 3-year-old daughter Lily, playing quietly with a threadbare stuffed teddy bear. Claire's face was pale but composed. She had been dreading this day for months, the final custody hearing with her ex-husband, Daniel Warren. What had once started as a whirlwind romance had ended in bitter legal warfare. Daniel sat across from her, flanked by his own attorney. He wore a sharp suit and an expression that teetered between smugness and irritation. Occasionally, he would glance at Claire, then at Lily, but never for long. His gaze always drifted back toward the judge's bench or the security guard posted at the entrance of the room. And standing by the judge's platform was something not typical of a family court hearing: a canine officer and his German Shepherd partner. The dog Rex was there for unrelated reasons. The court had recently implemented a policy that allowed certified canine units to be present in high-risk hearings, especially those involving violent histories. Daniel had no violent record on paper, but due to a recent tip about his possible connections to prior police investigations, the judge had requested precautionary security. Still, no one expected the dog to be anything but a silent observer. As Judge Marilyn Hughes entered and took her seat, everyone rose and then sat down. Her stern but fair demeanor had earned her respect throughout Texas. She adjusted her glasses and reviewed the folder in front of her. "Claire Bennett and Daniel Warren," she said. "We're here to finalize the custody terms for minor child Lily Warren. Miss Bennett, Mr. Warren, are you both prepared to proceed?" Both attorneys nodded. Claire gave a small nod as well. Lily remained silent, kicking her legs back and forth beneath the bench. Everything was routine so far. The judge continued. "Before we begin, I want to remind all parties that this is not a criminal proceeding. Our goal today is to determine what is best for the child, based on evidence and testimony. I ask for your cooperation and civility." Just then, Lily looked up. She had been unusually still up to that point. Claire had told her many times to stay quiet and be a good girl during the hearing. But now, Lily's wide eyes fixed on something across the courtroom, the K9. Her gaze did not flicker or move. Her small face twisted, not in fear exactly, but in something deeper: recognition. She slowly rose from her seat, standing on the bench to get a better look. Claire turned quickly, ready to hush her, but something stopped her. Lily's face had gone pale. Her tiny hand lifted and pointed directly at the German Shepherd. "Bad dog," she said. The words were soft, almost innocent. But the silence that followed was immediate and sharp. Everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, turned to stare at the little girl. "What did she say?" Judge Hughes asked, lowering her pen. Claire tried to steady her daughter. "Lily, honey, sit down," she whispered. "It's just a doggy." Lily didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on Rex. "Bad dog," she repeated. "That's the bad dog from Daddy's house." This time, the reaction was visceral. Officer Travis, the canine handler, stiffened. His grip on Rex's harness subtly tightened. The dog, too, stood straighter, ears perked. The animal didn't bark or growl, it just watched Lily, still and alert, as if recognizing her too. Daniel shifted in his seat. For the first time, a crack appeared in his mask of composure. I don't know what she's talking about," he muttered, looking around. Claire's expression changed entirely. She leaned forward, putting a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Sweetheart, what dog? Where did you see him before?" Lily pointed again, clearly this time. "He came to Daddy's house. When the men yelled, the dog was loud. I hid under the table." The judge sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. "Mr. Warren," she said, "has this child ever been present during a law enforcement action at your residence?" Daniel looked like a deer caught in headlights. "No, absolutely not. That's not possible." The judge looked at Officer Travis. "Was your dog, Rex, ever present at a search or raid at the residence of Daniel Warren?" Travis hesitated. "Your Honor, I'd have to check official records, but this dog has been involved in several narcotics operations. I can't say for sure without looking at the deployment logs." Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "He barked at Daddy. He made him fall down." Claire blinked, realization dawning. "She's talking about the night Daniel called me crying. He said the neighbors complained and police came for a noise issue." "He said it was nothing." Claire turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we never received an official notice. No record ever came to me. But Lily had nightmares for weeks. She kept saying the dog bit Daddy and barked. I thought it was just a dream." Judge Hughes looked down at her folder. "This hearing is now paused. I want deployment records of that K-9 unit for the past 6 months. Immediately. And Officer Travis, please remain for questioning." "This may change everything." Claire pulled Lily into her lap, heart pounding. Her daughter had just spoken 2 simple words. But somehow, in the quiet courtroom, they echoed louder than anything else that day. The room was frozen. Not in fear, but in confusion laced with a tension thick enough to slice through. No one had expected a toddler's voice to interrupt legal proceedings, let alone shift the entire courtroom's attention. And yet, that's exactly what had happened. Judge Hughes tapped her pen lightly against her desk. The room remained quiet as she scanned her notes again. The bailiff, sensing the judge's shift in demeanor, stepped toward the side exit to call for a clerk to retrieve records. Claire held Lily tighter, gently brushing a hand through her daughter's golden curls. Her heart beat faster with every second. Lily had returned to silence now, as if nothing had happened. Her small frame rested calmly on her mother's lap, eyes still focused curiously on the German shepherd. The dog, to its credit, hadn't made a sound either. But Officer Travis, who had been composed until this point, looked like he was replaying the toddler's words over and over again in his head. "I've handled this dog for 4 years, he finally said, breaking the silence. "Rex is trained to alert on illegal substances, weapons, or imminent physical threats. He does not engage unless provoked or instructed." The judge nodded. "Understood, officer. You'll provide a detailed statement regarding the dog's recent deployments, especially any that involved the residence of Mr. Warren." Officer Travis gave a sharp nod, his face pale but professional. Daniel's lawyer, Mr. Halvorsen, stood up quickly. "Your Honor, with respect, we're veering wildly off track. This is a custody case, not a criminal trial. A child's mistaken. Memory shouldn't delay or jeopardize the ruling." Judge Hughes looked over her glasses. "Counselor, a child's memory is often underestimated. But if that memory points to an unreported incident that may concern child welfare or endangerment, I have not only the right, but the responsibility to investigate." Claire's attorney, Miss Rosario, stood as well. "Your Honor, we support a full review. My client was never informed about a police raid or any event that involved her child. If Mr. Warren knowingly exposed the child to danger and withheld that information from the court, then this custody hearing must be reconsidered in that light." Daniel squirmed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "It was just some noise complaint. The police were in and out. They didn't even find anything." Lily stirred in Claire's lap. "Dog barked. Daddy yelled. Table broke. Claire's. Breath caught. The memory had surfaced again, and more clearly this time. It wasn't a dream. It was real. The pieces began falling into place. That night, months ago, Daniel had called her sounding shaken, saying it was just a misunderstanding with the neighbors. He never mentioned police. He never mentioned a raid. And certainly never mentioned that Lily had been there to witness it. The bailiff returned with a tablet, handing it to Judge Hughes. She scrolled through the digital files quickly, eyebrows raising slightly. Officer Travis, she said, according to these records, your K-9 was deployed to a narcotics-related search warrant 3 months ago at 1147 Mayfield Avenue, apartment 3B. Mr. Warren, is that your current address? Daniel swallowed. Yes. And were you present during that search? Daniel hesitated. Yes, but like I said, nothing came of it. I wasn't charged. And was your daughter present at that time? He looked around, cornered, trapped in front of the very truth he had tried to hide. I didn't know she was awake, he finally muttered. She was asleep when they came. I told her to stay under the table. The courtroom reacted. Subtly, but powerfully. One of the jurors from an earlier trial, still seated in the audience, gasped under their breath. Even Rex, the canine, shifted his weight. Claire leaned forward in her seat. You told her to stay under the table while armed officers were storming your apartment? Daniel threw up his hands. What was I supposed to do? She woke up crying. I didn't want her to see me cuffed. I didn't want any of this to come out. Why didn't you tell the court? Judge Hughes asked sharply. Because it didn't matter, Daniel snapped. She was fine. She wasn't hurt. The dog didn't bite her. I didn't want it to look bad. Mr. Warren, you will stop speaking unless asked a direct question, the judge barked. Claire felt her pulse quicken. It was worse than she thought. Her little girl had not only witnessed a traumatic police raid, but her father had tried to bury it under a wall of lies. And the court might have ruled in his favor, if not for Lily's innocent recognition of a dog. Officer Travis raised his hand slightly. Your Honor, if I may, I remember that raid. It was chaotic, loud, multiple units on site. But I distinctly remember Rex acting out of character. He wasn't alerting to substances. He ran into the living room and barked under a table. At the time, I thought maybe something was hidden there, but there was. A child. Claire's eyes watered. Your daughter, he continued, nodding to Claire. She was shaking, curled up. I remember trying to calm her down, but the operation pulled me away. When we left, I asked if anyone filed a child welfare concern. They said it was handled. But maybe it wasn't. Judge Hughes exhaled slowly. It clearly was not. We are no longer dealing with a simple case of parental disagreement. This court has reason to believe a child was subjected to a traumatic event, and the truth was concealed from legal authorities. I am suspending all custody decisions until a full investigation is completed. Daniel's head fell into his hands. Claire, stunned, looked down at Lily, who had now started humming to herself and rocking gently. Good girl, Claire whispered. To her, you were so brave. Lily smiled up at her mom. I just didn't want the dog to bark again. Claire kissed her on the forehead. The courtroom began to clear for recess, but the weight of what had just happened lingered. All it took was 2 words from a toddler to blow open secrets, unravel lies, and bring the whole truth to light. And this was only the beginning. The courtroom was nearly empty now. The judge had called a recess, and most of the audience had cleared out, whispering among themselves as they left. Yet the energy left behind in the room was far from calm. Claire remained seated, holding Lily tightly in her lap, her mind racing. What had started as a routine custody hearing was now something else, something deeper. tangled with buried secrets and danger that had remained hidden in plain sight. Officer Travis lingered by the side wall, standing with his arms crossed, still watching Lily. The more he stared at her, the more he remembered that night 3 months ago. A terrified little girl under the table, her eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling. He had thought about that child more than once since then, feeling uneasy about how the situation had been dismissed so easily. Now he understood why he couldn't forget her. Claire leaned down to Lily's level. "Sweetheart, can you tell Mommy what happened that night? With the dog?" Lily looked up, blinking slowly. The dog barked really loud. Daddy got mad and threw the chair. Then the man yelled at Daddy. They pushed him down. I hid. Claire nodded gently, fighting the lump in her throat. She had always suspected that something wasn't right in Daniel's home. He had a temper. He liked to pretend he didn't. But even during their marriage, she had seen glimpses. Holes in walls, broken dishes, sudden shouting over minor things. But she never had enough proof to raise alarm. Until now. Claire looked over at Officer Travis. Why wasn't there a report about the child? Isn't it protocol to notify someone when there's a minor involved in a raid? He nodded slowly. It is. I remember asking that exact question. One of the lead officers said they had already notified the caseworker. Said it wasn't our concern anymore. It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't have the authority to override it. I wish I had pushed harder. Claire frowned. There was no follow-up. Nothing from Child Protective Services. No call, no paperwork, no questions. Nothing. Travis sighed. Then something was buried. As they spoke, Claire's attorney, Miss Rosario, returned from the clerk's office, clutching a manila folder. We have a problem, she said immediately, her voice low. I requested official paperwork from the Mayfield raid. The file is incomplete. It lists the address, the officers present, and the seizure record, which was 0 by the way, but there's no mention of a child in the home. No signed CPS notification form. No witness statements. It's like Lily was never there. Claire's eyes narrowed. Because they didn't want her to be. Ms. Rosario nodded grimly. Exactly. Someone on that team may have deliberately excluded it. Officer Travis's jaw clenched. That's a major breach of protocol. Your Honor won't take this lightly, Rosario continued. But if we can prove it, we're not only talking about custody anymore. We're talking about misconduct, endangerment, cover-up. Claire was suddenly overcome by a wave of nausea. The idea that so many people trained officers, professionals could have knowingly looked the other way when her daughter was exposed to such trauma was terrifying. Lily had cried for nights after visiting her father, waking up screaming that the dog was in the room, that Daddy was yelling, that things were breaking. Claire had believed it was just a toddler's bad dream. Now, it was all coming together like puzzle pieces she hadn't known were missing. Do you have the body? Cam footage? She asked. Rosario nodded. It's being pulled. The judge put in an emergency request to the department's internal archive. We should have it before the next session. Officer Travis stepped forward. I want to be there when it's reviewed. I was on site. If anything was edited or omitted, I'll notice. Rosario looked at him. We may need your testimony. This could become much bigger than a custody case. Travis nodded without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Just then, Daniel's lawyer, Halvorsen, appeared. At the doorway. He hesitated before walking in, his expression tight. He didn't look like a man confident in his case anymore. I need to speak with Claire's counsel, he said. Privately. Rosario raised an eyebrow, but followed him into the hallway. Claire stayed seated, still trying to comfort Lily. The little girl leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, eyes heavy now with exhaustion. The courtroom drama had drained her. Claire softly hummed a lullaby into her ear, her hand stroking Lily's back. Inside the hallway, Halvorsen spoke quickly. My client didn't want this to come out, obviously. He believed that if he could keep the details of that night hidden, the court would lean toward a joint custody ruling. Rosario folded her arms. So he admits to hiding the truth? Halvorsen hesitated. Off the record, yes. He's terrified of criminal charges. He thought the raid wouldn't matter if nothing was found, and no one was injured. No one injured? Rosario snapped. A child was psychologically scarred, and he covered it up. I know, Halvorsen said. Look, I think he'd be open to a settlement. Give full custody to the mother. He just doesn't want a criminal investigation. Rosario stared him down. That's not how this works. I'm just offering options. Rosario turned and walked back inside. Claire looked up, watching her lawyer return. Well? She asked. Rosario glanced at Lily, now fast asleep in her arms, before answering. Daniel's trying to walk away from this clean. He's ready to give up custody if we agree not to pursue charges. But it's not his call anymore. The judge has already seen enough to take it higher. Claire exhaled. It wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about truth. About making sure no other child was ignored. No other report buried. No other trauma dismissed as imagination. As she looked down at her sleeping daughter, one thing became crystal clear. Lily's voice may have been small, but it had carried the weight of justice. The courtroom was scheduled to reconvene in less than an hour, but Judge Hughes had already returned to her chambers with a fresh cup of coffee and a grim look on her face. She'd seen many twists in her decades on the bench, but never one that began with a toddler's innocent words and spiraled into what was now looking like a concealed police failure and potential child endangerment. In the courtroom, Claire sat with Lily still asleep in her lap, her breathing steady and soft. But Claire's heart wasn't calm. Her mind had become a battlefield, flashes of memory, regret, guilt, and anger crashing over her in waves. She had trusted Daniel once. She had trusted the system too. And both had failed her. Officer Travis sat on a bench behind them, scrolling through his phone with a tense grip. He had requested permission to speak with the department's internal affairs unit. Something didn't sit right with him, not just about the raid, but about how the child's presence had vanished from official records. It didn't feel like incompetence. It felt like someone had deliberately chosen silence. Claire leaned her head back and whispered to herself. How many people knew? Her attorney, Rosario, returned from a call, expression unreadable. She walked over, took the seat beside Claire, and leaned in close. They've released the unedited body cam footage to us, Rosario said quietly. It's been verified by the department's internal timestamp system. The judge and both legal teams will review it privately before the next session begins. Claire nodded, her stomach turning. Was she on it? She asked hesitantly. Lily? Rosario hesitated, then nodded. She's visible, clear as day. Under the table, crying. The dog stops at her side. She reaches out to him. He stays there, guarding her, until an officer drags him back. No one checks on her. Not a word is said in the report. Claire bit her lip hard, trying not to break in front of her daughter. She knew what that footage meant. This wasn't just about Daniel's lies anymore. It wasn't just about a custody battle. It was about the kind of systemic failure that left children in danger and covered it up when things got uncomfortable. She whispered, they didn't care. Rosario reached out and squeezed her hand. They will now. Meanwhile, in a small room down the hall, Daniel sat alone, waiting for his attorney. The air felt heavy. His palms were sweaty, and he kept wringing his hands, over and over. For years, he had told himself he wasn't a bad father. He just had a temper. He was under stress. He never hit Lily. He just yelled, broke things, slammed doors. That didn't make him dangerous, right? But now, with officers testifying, footage surfacing, and Lily's voice echoing in everyone's memory, Daniel was no longer sure what kind of man he was, or whether he even deserved to ask for forgiveness. His attorney, Halvorsen, entered briskly, shutting the door behind him. "It's over," he said flatly. Daniel looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've seen the footage. The judge has seen it. There's no way this hearing ends in your favor." Daniel looked away. "I already said I'd walk away if she dropped the charges." Halvorsen leaned in. "She doesn't have to press charges. The judge can refer it directly to the day. And it looks like she might." Daniel buried his face in his hands. "I didn't hurt her." "No," Halvorsen agreed. "But you let her sit in danger. You hid the truth. And when the court asked for full disclosure, you lied. That's enough to end your parental rights. And it might be enough to get you charged with reckless endangerment." Silence. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I didn't think she remembered." "But she did," Halvorsen said, "and worse so did the dog." Back in the courtroom, Judge Hughes returned, looking more serious than before. The body cam footage had shaken her. Not only had the child's presence been omitted, but the entire situation had been handled with a negligence she couldn't ignore. And Officer Travis's report, hastily scribbled and digitally stamped, had been altered afterward. The original timestamp proved it. She called the court back to session. "Before we proceed," she said firmly, "I want the record to reflect that this court has reviewed the official police footage of the incident dated 3 months prior. The minor child was visibly present during a high-risk narcotics search. She was not acknowledged, assisted, or documented by officers during or after the event. Furthermore, the deployment report filed by Officer Travis has been determined to have been edited after submission, and the required CPS notification was omitted entirely." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Judge Hughes continued, "This court is therefore opening a formal inquiry into misconduct by responding officers and administrative personnel. This includes a referral to the district attorney's office." Claire gripped the seat under her with both hands. Daniel looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Now," the judge said, turning her attention to the custody matter, "regarding the welfare of Lily Warren based on recent revelations. It is the opinion of this court that Mr. Daniel Warren has demonstrated a failure to provide a safe and stable environment. This failure includes withholding information from the court and exposing a minor child to a traumatic, undocumented law enforcement situation." Daniel tried to speak, but his lawyer put a firm hand on his shoulder. It was over. "I hereby suspend all custodial rights of Mr. Warren pending a final judgment. Full temporary custody is granted to Miss Claire Bennett. Supervised visitation may be requested pending evaluation from Child Services and a psychological assessment." Claire broke into tears, not of sorrow, but relief. Lily stirred in her arms and looked up. "Mommy?" she whispered. Claire kissed her on the forehead. "It's okay now," she said, smiling through the tears. "We're going home." The courtroom was silent as the judge rose. The bailiff called the court adjourned, and just like that, the gavel fell not just on a hearing, but on a long hidden truth that had nearly slipped through the cracks. But not anymore. The day after the courtroom erupted in revelation, a storm had already begun to brew outside its walls. News of the hearing centered around a toddler's 2 words and a forgotten police raid had begun circulating quietly among law enforcement circles and legal offices. But by noon the next day, it wasn't quiet anymore. A local reporter from Houston's Channel 6 News had caught wind of the story, and within hours, The headline broke. K9, Toddler, and the custody case that opened a hidden police raid. Claire sat at her kitchen table, clutching her coffee mug with both hands. She hadn't slept all night. Even with the court victory still fresh in her mind, her heart refused to settle. Her daughter, her baby, had been exposed to something violent, something meant to be erased. And if not for two little words, no one would have known. Lily played quietly in the living room, building towers from her blocks. She hummed a song to herself, calm now, as if the courtroom drama had evaporated from her memory. Claire was grateful for that, but she also knew trauma could be sneaky, lurking in silence, waiting to resurface when least expected. That's why she'd already scheduled counseling for Lily. She wasn't going to let the system fail her child again. A knock at the door startled her. She peeked out and saw Officer Travis standing on her porch, holding a large envelope under his arm. Claire opened the door cautiously, but his warm eyes and slight nod eased her worry. Didn't mean to show up unannounced, he said. Can I come in for a moment? Claire opened the door fully. Of course. He stepped inside, glancing at Lily in the living room. She noticed him, stood up, and stared for a long moment. Dog man, she said with a shy smile. Travis chuckled. That's me. Claire smiled, touched by Lily's comfort with him. She remembers you. He handed Claire the envelope. This is the original incident report, the one I submitted the night of the raid, before it was edited. Claire frowned. You had a copy? I kept it, he admitted. Something felt wrong from the start. When the final report came back scrubbed, I knew someone had deleted my lines about a minor being present. I filed a quiet complaint, but it disappeared into thin air. I should have pushed harder. You did what you could, Claire said, flipping through the pages. At least you didn't forget her. She saved herself, Travis said, glancing at Lily. She remembered more than we did. Claire paused on a section of the report describing Rex's behavior, how he had broken protocol by veering away from a scent trail to guard a child. Officers on site thought the dog had malfunctioned. But now it was clear he hadn't malfunctioned. He had protected. There's more, Travis added. The Internal Affairs Unit opened an investigation last night. They're looking into who altered the report and why the CPS notification was never filed. Heads are going to roll, Claire. This case has become a lit match in a very dry room. Claire closed the folder. Good. Maybe then people will stop. Pretending children like Lily can be ignored. Before Travis could reply, Lily approached them, holding her teddy bear. Will the dog come back? She asked quietly. Travis knelt down. Rex is resting now. He's a little older, so he might retire soon. Lily nodded. He's a good dog. Not a bad dog. Travis smiled. That's right. He was never bad. You were just scared. Claire knelt beside her daughter. And you were brave enough to tell the truth when no one else did. Lily beamed. Later that afternoon, Claire and Rosario met at the Child Welfare Services office to provide a formal statement. The building, with its clinical white walls and clipped conversation, felt cold and bureaucratic. But this time, Claire wasn't here to ask for help. She was here to give evidence. A woman named Miss Delgado, head of investigations, led them into a small room and hit the record button on the digital recorder. Ms. Bennett, she began, can you walk me through the timeline of when you first suspected something had happened at your ex-husband's residence? Claire spoke clearly, with Rosario sitting beside her. She told them everything: Lily's nightmares, her odd fear of dogs, her confusion about what had happened that night, and most importantly, the way her daughter had recognized the K9 in court. Delgado listened without interruption, occasionally jotting down notes. Rosario placed the original incident report on the table. This was submitted by the K-9 officer. It was erased from the final file. Delgado's eyebrows lifted as she flipped through the pages. This is significant. It shows intent to conceal. Do you believe Mr. Warren influenced the report? Claire hesitated. I think he benefited from its disappearance. Whether or not he made the call, I can't say. But he knew. He knew Lily was there. He knew what happened. Delgado nodded. We'll be contacting the DA's office for coordination. Expect a subpoena for further testimony. You've done the right thing, Miss Bennett. When the meeting ended, Claire walked out of the office, feeling a strange mixture of emotions: exhaustion, relief, dread, and pride. Her life had changed in just a few days. And now, other lives might change because of it. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Claire sat outside on her porch with Lily curled up beside her, wrapped in a soft blanket. Fireflies blinked in the distance, and the hum of distant traffic was the only sound. Lily looked up at her mother. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart? Did I do something good? Claire wrapped her arms tighter around her daughter and kissed her forehead. You did something amazing, she whispered. You told the truth when no one else did. Lily smiled and nestled deeper into her side. For the first time in months, Claire felt peace. But deep inside, she also felt something else. Resolve. This wasn't over. Not until every buried truth was brought into the light. The morning after Claire's meeting with Child Welfare Services, the phone rang before dawn. She jolted upright in bed, heart pounding, fearing the worst. But it wasn't bad news, at least, not for her. It was Rosario. They arrested 2 officers, she said breathlessly. One was the supervisor on the raid. The other was in charge of filing the reports. Claire sat up, fully awake now. Arrested? For what? Falsifying official documents, obstruction, and something about witness intimidation. Internal Affairs dug into the records after your statement and found a pattern. This wasn't the first time a report was cleaned up. Claire's pulse thudded in her ears. So it wasn't just Lily. There were other kids? Maybe. They're still investigating. She hung up and sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had happened pressing hard on her chest. She wasn't just fighting for her daughter anymore. She had cracked something wider open. And that realization felt both terrifying and empowering. By noon, reporters were parked outside her home. Claire had expected attention, maybe even some unwanted headlines. But the full media circus arrived much faster than she was prepared for. Camera crews lined the street. Microphones hovered the moment she stepped out to check her mailbox. She turned them away politely, but firmly, clutching Lily's hand tightly the whole time. It wasn't long before her phone lit up with an unknown number. She hesitated and answered. Ms. Bennett? Came a composed female voice. This is Linda Crawford with CBS News. We'd like to request an interview, off camera at first. We're doing a deeper piece on judicial failures in child custody cases. Claire didn't know what to say. She wasn't trying to be a symbol or a whistleblower. She just wanted her daughter safe. But what if her silence meant more kids? Slipped through the cracks? I'll think about it, she replied. That night, Lily's therapist came over for an at-home session. The young woman, gentle and calm, brought crayons and a dollhouse. Lily took to her right away. As they colored together, Claire sat nearby, trying not to hover. Do you remember the big room where Mommy talked to the judge? The therapist asked gently. Lily nodded and drew a little stick figure of a dog beside a house. What did you feel when you saw the dog? Lily paused. I was scared. But then I remembered him. Remembered him how? He jumped in front of me. He barked. He didn't let the bad man come in. Claire's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just that Lily had been present. during the raid she had been shielded by that dog. Rex hadn't just been a piece of evidence. He had been her guardian. After the session, the therapist approached Claire in the kitchen. "She's handling it surprisingly well, considering. But I'd keep reinforcing that she's safe now. Her memories are still blurry, but they're rooted in fear." Claire nodded. I wish I could take it all away." "You can't," the therapist said gently. "But you've given her the chance to heal. That's more than most children in her situation get." The following week, Claire was called back into court, not for the custody case, but for the internal probe that had exploded into a full-blown corruption investigation. She sat in a private hearing room with a panel of judges, state prosecutors, and investigators from multiple agencies. Rosario was by her side again, her presence steady and uncheckable. One of the judges, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, we want to thank you for cooperating. What began as a custody review has turned into a revelation about systemic failure. Your daughter's words may have saved lives." Claire's voice trembled as she replied, "I didn't plan this. I just wanted to protect her." "That's exactly why it matters," the judge said. Evidence was presented, including body cam footage from the raid footage previously suppressed, now recovered by tech specialists. It showed the K9 veering off course and barking outside a small closet. And Officer Warren was seen yelling, pulling the dog back aggressively. The camera angle didn't catch Lily, but you could hear her. A faint whimper, a soft, frightened voice. One word. "Dog." Gasps filled the hearing room. Claire clutched her hands together. Rosario placed a hand on her knee, grounding her. "This proves she was there," the prosecutor said. "And someone went to great lengths to hide it." The panel nodded gravely. After the hearing, Claire stepped outside for air and found herself face to face with Officer Travis. "I saw the footage today," he said. "I'd never heard that part before." Her voice, Claire's throat tightened. "It's haunting. She didn't just remember Rex. He remembered her too. Dogs don't forget who they protect." They stood in silence for a moment, both staring at the courthouse steps. "You're going to be asked to speak publicly," Travis said. "I can't tell you what to do, but if you do choose to say something, know that a lot of officers, good ones, will be behind you." Claire took a deep breath. "I'll think about it." That evening, she sat on the porch again with Lily, just like before. The sky was darker now, overcast, with a chill in the air that hinted at the coming fall. Lily looked up at her. "Am I brave?" Claire smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You're the bravest person I know." And she meant it. Because two simple words had become the thread that unraveled something much bigger. Because a child had pointed at a dog, and everything changed. And because now, for the first time, in a long time, truth had a voice. Even if that voice was just 3 years old. Claire never imagined that one day she'd stand behind a podium with a room full of reporters staring back at her. The conference room inside the state courthouse was packed, cameras blinking, pens scribbling, whispers bouncing off the walls like static. But she stood tall. Lily wasn't with her, safely at home with her grandmother, but Claire kept her daughter's bracelet in her pocket, fingers curling around the tiny charm for courage. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice steady but low. "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't want to be at the center of this. I'm just a mother." Cameras clicked, lenses zoomed in. Some reporters leaned forward, sensing something big. "I'm a mother who is fighting for her child in a custody case. And if not for 2 words, 2 simple words, none of you would know what really happened in that courtroom." The room stilled. "My daughter saw something that day," Claire said. She remembered something that adults had tried to forget. She said 2 words. "Bad man." That's it. but it was enough to crack the silence wide open. Claire continued, laying out what the public hadn't yet heard. The internal corruption probe, the missing footage, the cover-up that went all the way up to a regional precinct captain. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply spoke like a mother telling the truth. And that made it hit harder than any shouting could have. When she finished, the silence lingered for several seconds before the questions started flying. Do you believe your daughter was the real target of the cover-up? What would you say to the officers who tried to bury the evidence? Do you plan to file a civil suit? Claire raised her hand gently and answered the only question she truly cared about. I just want to make sure no other child goes unheard. I want every voice to count, even the small ones. Outside the courthouse, Rosario was waiting. You were incredible, she said. Claire exhaled, nerves finally releasing. I didn't want to be. I just wanted to disappear after all this. Rosario smiled gently. But people who make history never get to disappear. And whether you like it or not, that's what this is now, history. That same week, Officer Travis reached out again. This time, he wasn't in uniform. He came by Claire's house with something she didn't expect, a medal. It was old, scratched, and hung on a worn ribbon. It was Rex's, he said. He got it for bravery during a hostage rescue a few years back. Claire held the medal in her hand, her throat tightening. Why are you giving me this? Because he was never honored for what he did for Lily. No one even knew. Until now. Claire nodded slowly. Thank you. The next day, Claire and Lily drove out to the animal shelter. The place was quieter than expected, a few barking dogs echoing through the halls. A volunteer named Sarah greeted them with a warm smile. We heard about you both, she said. I've got someone I think you should meet. They followed her to a fenced enclosure at the back. Inside was a Belgian Malinois alert, with eyes that followed every movement. But when Lily approached the gate, the dog didn't bark or growl. He simply wagged his tail once and tilted his head, watching her. Lily stood still, then whispered, Dog. Claire's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't fear this time. It was peace. Sarah knelt beside Lily. His name is Bolt. He's in training to be a therapy dog. But we think he's ready for something more permanent. Lily nodded solemnly, then reached through the fence to pat Bolt's head. He leaned into her touch. Claire blinked fast, smiling through the tears. I think we found our match. Later that night, Lily sat on the living room floor with Bolt, curled beside her, his head resting in her lap. Claire watched from the couch, her heart aching with gratitude. The next morning, Claire received another call, this time from a congresswoman's office. They wanted her to testify at a state panel about reforms in child protection policies and law enforcement accountability. It's a big step, Rosario told her when they spoke. But it's an important one. Claire wasn't sure. She wasn't a lawyer or a politician or a public speaker. But she was a mother who had walked through fire for her child and lived to talk about it. She agreed to testify. 2 weeks later, Claire stood before the panel. She wasn't just speaking for Lily anymore. She was speaking for every child who had whispered something that no one had listened to. For every toddler whose truth had been hidden by official silence. And the most powerful part, she read the entire last paragraph of her testimony in Lily's own words, taken from her drawings and therapy sessions. She said, I saw the dog. He made the bad man go away. Mommy found me. Those words, simple, clear, unfiltered, brought many in the room to tears. Claire left the building that day with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. Not because the fight was over, but because now it wasn't just her fight. It belonged to others too. Lawmakers, officers, parents, teachers. The system was waking up. That evening, she curled up on the porch swing, Lily asleep inside, Bolt curled at her feet. The stars above were scattered and soft, and for the first time, Claire wasn't dreading what tomorrow might bring. She looked down at her hands, which had once shaken so violently inside that courtroom. Now they were calm. 2 words from a child had started it all. And now her voice was echoing far beyond the courtroom walls. The months that followed turned into a quiet transformation, both for Claire and the world around her. What had begun as a heart-wrenching custody battle evolved into a catalyst for national attention. Headlines had moved on. Cameras had packed. But something more enduring lingered. Change. Claire was now part of a working committee focused on judicial reform and child advocacy. At first, she felt out of place, surrounded by seasoned lawyers, therapists, and policy experts. Her voice, unpolished and rooted in raw truth, quickly became the most valued in the room. She often reminded them, "I'm not here because I studied the system. I'm here because I survived it." One morning, Claire stood before a new audience, this time at a university symposium on criminal justice. The room was full of young law students, many scribbling notes while others simply watched her, visibly moved. "I used to believe the justice system always knew better than me," she told them. That authority always meant safety. But then my daughter said 2 words, "bad man," and everything I thought I knew unraveled. She paused, letting the silence settle. I learned that sometimes the smallest voice holds the biggest truth. And our system has to be brave enough to listen. After her talk, a student approached her. His name was Jordan. He was quiet, humble, and looked barely older than a teenager. "I just wanted to say, my little sister went through something similar. No one believed her at first," he said, his voice shaking. "But what you said today, ... it gave me hope that maybe someday I can be a voice for her too." Claire nodded, her chest tight. "Then that means we're doing something right." Back at home, Lily was flourishing. She spoke more now, slowly, carefully, but with confidence. Her therapist called her progress remarkable. Bolt, ever her shadow, rarely left her side. His training as a therapy dog was complete, and he was now officially registered. More importantly, he was family. Claire had started keeping a journal for Lily, recording moments, thoughts, and pieces of the journey she would one day want to understand. Not just the courtroom chaos, but the bravery it took to speak up, the truth that lived in her tiny voice. One evening, Lily sat on the living room floor with crayons spread around her. She was drawing a picture of Bolt and herself standing beside a tall woman in a suit. Claire peered over her shoulder. "Who's that?" she asked. Lily grinned. "That's you. You told the big people what I said." Claire swallowed a lump in her throat. "Yeah, I guess I did." "You were loud like the judge," Lily added. "But nice." Claire laughed, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "I'll take that." The city held a special event later that season, honoring local heroes. Claire didn't expect to be called up, but when the mayor read her name, the crowd erupted in applause. She walked up nervously, heart pounding, and accepted a simple glass plaque etched with the words, "For courage beyond the stand." Next to her, a second name was called, Officer Travis. He approached the podium, holding Rex's medal in one hand and a framed photo of the dog in the other. He spoke softly but firmly. Rex didn't just serve as a K-9 officer. He protected a child when no one else could see the danger. And that, to me, is the true definition of duty. Claire placed a hand over her heart, fighting back tears. The audience stood in a silent tribute. A few weeks later, Claire launched a small nonprofit called Tiny Voices United. It was focused on helping children involved in court cases, especially those too young to advocate for themselves. The organization partnered with child psychologists, legal experts, and therapy dog handlers. Its mission was clear. No child's voice would go unheard again. The project gained traction fast. Local news ran stories on it, donations began pouring in, and even schools invited Claire to speak. One by one, doors opened where none had existed before. But for Claire, the biggest reward came not from awards or recognition. It came from the letters, parents, social workers, foster kids, survivors, all writing to share their own stories, their own 2 words. One letter in particular stayed with her. It was from a foster mother in Kansas who wrote, "I almost didn't believe my little girl when she said something strange about a man at church. But then I remembered your story. I listened. And now I'm so grateful I did." Claire folded that letter gently and tucked it inside her journal. On the 1-year anniversary of the court hearing, Claire took Lily and Bolt to the park near the courthouse. They brought flowers for Rex and placed them at the base of a small tree where a bronze plaque had been newly installed, in memory of Rex, a hero who heard the truth before anyone else. Lily held Bolt's leash tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Rex." Claire stood beside her, the wind lifting her hair, and she smiled. Not because everything had gone back to normal, nothing ever truly would, but because something better had grown from the pain. Justice, voice, legacy. Claire looked out at the world beyond the park. There would always be more children like Lily, more parents like her, and now more people who would choose to listen. 2 words had changed everything, and now those words would echo forever. The end.